Hello and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host Rob. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at Warlock spells. I think we're going to do two videos. One's going to be dealing with first to 5th level, and then the next one we'll look at the 6th to 9th level choices as well as the different patron choices. Mostly just so we can have, two 20-minute videos instead of one 40 or 50 or 60-minute video, whatever it ends up being. I think it'll just be easier to navigate and won't be quite as tedious, hopefully. So, I recently did a video for clerics, and we just went through every cleric spell level, and I talked about which ones I liked and maybe a few that I didn't like, or thought were maybe overrated. And in the comment section of that video, someone requested that I do a Warlock video. And I think they made a very solid point. They said that Warlock spells can often be very difficult to choose because of the auto-scaling of Pact magic. So things like Shield or Mirror Image, which may be excellent spells on a wizard or a sorcerer, end up not being as good on a warlock because they auto-scale. So if you're making a Hexblade and you're like, hey, I took a, Hexblade Patron, I get Shield, I'm going to be in melee a lot, this is awesome. And then you start realizing that, Shield was a great 1st level spell, but it's not a great 5th level spell. And a lot of warlock spells really suffer from this issue, including a lot of the movement ones. Now, you can take some of these spells and then just swap them out as you level up. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But you also don't want to have all spells that you're going to be needing to swap out. You need some that are just going to be there, reliable, and just want some solid choices, right? So, I do think that that is an issue for warlocks. I also think that warlocks tend to be a little more complicated because you really have like 3 different main ways to build a warlock. You've either got your blasters and you've got your blade locks, who often play very differently. That's not to say you couldn't be a blade lock who mostly casts and blasts and then just has the versatility to mix it up in melee, but that's not how most people seem to play the class. And then there's also another archetype, which is basically that summoner. Usually Pact of the Chain, you take a bunch of the summon spells like Create Undead or Dance Macabre, things like that line. Maybe you take like Conjure Fey as as your 6th level spell, your only 6th level spell, not one of your only one. Jeez. Things along that line. And so, like things like Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade are excellent spells if you're going to be in melee a lot. So if I say that those are good spells, obviously I don't mean to take it on a Pact of the Chain Warlock who wants to have a bunch of pets fighting for them. That's just kind of common sense, but whatever. I'll mention it anyways. So, enough preamble, let's just jump right into it. And, I'm going to give you a general rule as well on direct damage spells for warlocks, which is don't bother with anything except for Eldritch Blast if it's going to take a spell slot. So, like Witch Bolt is a great example. I personally think Witch Bolt is a terrible spell, but even if you think it's a good spell, the fact is you have very, very limited number of spell slots as a warlock. And really Witch Bolt is just going to do damage to one target, which Eldritch Blast could have been doing. It's not going to use a concentration the way that Witch Bolt is. And yeah, Witch Bolt only requires the 1 hit roll and you can do persistent damage round after round. But is that really worth giving up one of your only spell slots at low level? I mean, you only have 2 spell slots per day until you get to like level 11, I think, you get a 3rd one. Maybe it's 9. I think it's 11, though, when you finally get your 3rd per short rest. Sorry, not per day. But the point is that if you get into a fight, yeah, your spell slots are coming back on a short rest. But you're not like a wizard who could drop like 6 spells in one big fight if he needs to. You have 2 spell slots. That's it. So you kind of got to get the most out of them you can. And if you're just going to be doing single target damage, you might as well just use Eldritch Blast. It's going to save a lot of your spell selection choices, and it's obviously going to help to relieve a lot of that issue where you're using up spell slots to damage one guy. So, obviously, when we talk about cantrips, the standard choice is not True Strike. It is Eldritch Blast. It's pretty much impossible to not talk about Eldritch Blast if you talk about warlocks. Now, even just the base spell alone, the damage scales exactly the same as Firebolt, which is pretty decent. But I would say that Eldritch Blast is slightly better, even without invocations. It's force damage instead of fire, which is much less commonly resisted or immune. And you have the option of hitting different targets with it, whereas, Fireball's just one target. And yeah, you're probably less likely to do your full damage, because if you're having to make 3 or 4 hit rolls instead of 1, odds are you're going to miss one. But your damage is also going to be more consistent, because it's not just one attack hit or miss, right? But, of course, we all know that the reason Eldritch Blast is so good isn't because it barely edges out Firebolt. It's because you have so many invocations that modify the way the spell works, and that just improve it and make it better. You got things like Eldritch Spear that double the damage. Agonizing Blast, doubles the range. Agonizing Blast, which basically doubles the damage, assuming you have, 20 charisma. You've got things like Grasp of Vidar, so you can pull stuff towards you, and Repelling Blast to push things back, giving like a crowd control effect. And you can make a Warlock, and I've seen it personally firsthand. My buddy Cody played basically this character, where he just took Repelling Blast and every other invocation he could find that modified the way Eldritch Blast worked, and he just spammed Eldritch Blast almost every single round. And some people might find that boring, but I can tell you it was very effective. It was especially effective combined with my wife's Wizard, because she would use a lot of like AoE persistent damage spells, things like Wall of Fire and stuff. And then Cody's Warlock would like knock guys back through the wall. They'd come through, take a bunch of damage, he'd knock them back on the other side, and now they have to take the damage again. And you don't even need a teammate. You could do that with like Hunger of Vidar or any of the other Warlock spells. I mean, you could do it with Wall of Fire if you want with Pact of the Fiend, right? You can take Wall of Fire then. But just the fact that you've got a cantrip which does really good damage, that can have amazing range, has CC abilities you can attach to it. It's just a phenomenal spell. So obviously that's gonna be, my go-to, even on like a Pact of the Blade Warlock. If I'm planning on just going a lot of melee stuff, I'm still gonna take Eldritch Blast, just so I have a range option. And maybe I don't take Agonizing Blast right away, depending on if I think I need, other invocations instead. But I'm still probably going to pick it up at some point, just because it's so incredibly good. So that's that one. Obviously, Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade, and also Sword Burst, all from Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. I didn't know there were 3 good spells in Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. So there's 3 good cantrips alone, so it could be better than I'd given it credit for. All 3 of those are pretty good. You do sometimes have trade-offs, because sometimes extra attack might be better than just attacking with a Green Flame Blade or a Booming Blade. But sometimes the Green Flame Blade, especially, is kind of like attacking twice anyways, but with scaling damage on your initial hit. And on the other hit too, actually. So, it can be pretty handy. And having the option to switch back and forth is pretty decent. I also like Toll the Dead. And I know that I just spent a bunch of time talking about Eldritch Blast and how good it is. And Eldritch Blast, like, if you're only going to take one or the other, take Eldritch Blast. But the nice thing about Toll the Dead is that it's a saving throw instead of an attack roll. Now, usually I would prefer an attack roll. But there are times when you might have disadvantage on the attack, and then Toll the Dead is going to be a better option. So having that flexibility is nice. Now, if you're playing a Pact of the Blade Warlock, do you really need 2 ranged options at low level? Probably not, right? I probably wouldn't take both. But if you're playing like a blaster caster and you're like, oh, what if I'm melee and I can't disengage? What if this? What if that? Well, that's what Toll the Dead is for. So, if you can spare an extra cantrip for more damage of a different type, and I don't mean like damage type, I mean, saving throw as opposed to hit roll, then I think it's decent. I also like Prestidigitation. It's just generally useful and kind of fun for roleplay purposes. And Mage Hand is always pretty handy as well, I find. So level 1 spells. Man, that took way longer on cantrips than I meant to. My 2 favorites, but I'm going to mention some others as well, are Armor of Agathis and Hex. And both these spells scale pretty well. They're both really good. Armor of Agathis, I think, is better on blade locks, but it's even pretty good on blaster types. And I find Hex is actually better on blaster types because Elder's Blast is going to scale up to like 2, 3, and even 4 bolts eventually. Whereas you're probably not going to have 4 attacks around with the Pact weapon. I mean, maybe you have a glaive, you could be making 2 attacks around and then a bonus action if you have Pull Arm Mastery. But even still, that bonus action attack might interfere with Hex here and there. You know, cast it or move it 1 round, and you're going to make the Pull Arm extra attack the next round. But still really good on both. Both those spells are good on any type of Warlock. They just really shine on, you know, the different types, right? I kind of like Hellish Rebuke. I do think I prefer it as the Tiefling racial spell. You just get it for free. But there's something that kind of appeals to me about that kind of Thorns build where you have Armor of Agathis on you and somebody hits you, they take a bunch of damage, and then you use your reaction to Hellish Rebuke them, and now they take even more damage. And maybe you have Shadows of Moil on you. We're going to talk about that in 4th level spell selection. And they're taking even more damage. You just have this like really, spiky Thorns type build, which I think is just funny and cool. So I do like Hellish Rebuke. It's not as good as Armor of Agathis though, because Armor of Agathis gives you damage absorption and damage reflection. Hellish Rebuke's only giving you damage reflection, and it's using your reaction, and they get a saving throw for half damage. So if it's one or the other, go with the armor. But, you know, if you can spare Hellish Rebuke, it's not the worst choice you can make. Arms of Hadar is one that I really want to like because it's a Warlock only spell. And I'm not saying that there's not like kind of niche for it where you can use it to deny people their reaction. The damage is kind of low, but it is only a 1st level spell and there is some scaling there. You know, so you don't have a lot of good AoE type effects as a Warlock. I mean, Burning Hands if you went past the Fiend, but if you didn't, you don't even have that, you know? So it's not bad, but there is friendly fire, which could be an issue. And, you know, if you're not a Pact of the Blade Warlock, you probably didn't want to be up close and in melee anyway. Maybe you're going to try to use that so you can disengage, but honestly, you might just be better off taking the dodge action sometimes. I don't even know. But I do like the idea of Arms of Hadar, so I'm still going to mention it. Protection from Good and Evil is a spell that I usually like, but I just don't find it very good on Warlocks. I mean, if you've only got 2 spells for Short Rest, and this is taking up your concentration spell slot, and it's taking up half your casting slots, I'm not saying it's bad. I even think that taking it at like 1st or 2nd level might be a good choice, but it's one you're definitely going to want to swap out. And that's going to go as well for Expeditious Retreat. I can't remember if that one's actually on the main Warlock spell list or if it's only on one of the patron lists. I can't remember. But either way, having some nice movement bonus is good, but the lack of scaling means that it's not as good as it would have been on someone else. Level 2 spells. We're going to make up some time here because there's not a lot of good ones. Darkness is phenomenal, and it's even better combined with Devil Sight. Of course, everybody already knows about this. We've talked about it before in the past. But, you know, you just blind people while you can see through the darkness, and now you have advantage on all your attacks, and they have disadvantage to hit you. It's ridiculous, and it's amazing. Darkness is also even better if you picked it up as a racial ability from, say, like Drow Elf or something like that. Or Tiefling. Hold Person? Hold Person's a spell that, like, if I have lots of options, I'm sometimes really hesitant to take it because it's just all or nothing, right? I think Hold Person scales very well though, so it's pretty good for Warlocks, and you just don't have a lot of other really strong options at level 2. I think Misty Step is really good as a 2nd level spell, but again, it's another one you might want to have to swap out. So that's really about it for the main core 2nd level spells. Level 3 though, we have the exact opposite problem. We have way too many good ones to choose from almost. Obviously, when you're talking level 3 spells, Counterspell and Dispel Magic, somebody in the party really needs to have Counterspell especially, but Dispel Magic is almost as important. And I do think that on Warlocks, it's not quite as good as it is on, say, Wizards or Sorcerers. Again, you have very limited spell slots that you can use in any given fight, and the auto-scaling of Counterspell can sometimes work against it. But the truth is that if nobody else in your party has a Counterspell, somebody, you know, it's going to be up to you. And Counterspell is just, it's such a game changer that I never want my party to not have access to it. And maybe you have a wizard and a sorcerer, and you're playing like a Pact of the Blade Warlock or something, and then you're like, hey, you know what? Those guys got it covered. I'm not going to worry about counterspell. I think that's a perfectly sensible choice in those circumstances. But if they, if you don't have anybody else with counterspell, they counterspell. And same kind of goes for the spell magic. Enemies Abound. This is a really cool spell, and just because it's so awesome, and there are some like kind of quirky limitations, but it is a pretty great spell, so I'm going to recommend it. Fear. This is one that doesn't scale particularly well, but it is very powerful. And, you can either just take it and keep it because it's so good, or maybe swap it out once you start getting like 4th and 5th level spell slots. But it isn't a bad choice. Fly is an excellent choice. I really like Hunger of Hadar. Again, it's a Warlock only spell, kind of combining like blindness with some damage. But my only problem with Hunger of Hadar is I wish the damage scaled. I don't know why it doesn't. It's a Warlock only spell. Even if the damage just increased by a little bit, but whatever. It's still really cool, and combined with things like Repelling Blast and Grasp of Hadar, your ability to keep enemies inside the Hunger of Hadar dark area makes it a pretty good choice. Hypnotic Pattern is a phenomenal spell. Again, doesn't scale, but it's so good that you might not even care. Vampiric Touch is an interesting choice. I think it's pretty good on like Pact of the Blade Warlocks. If you haven't read up on it in 5th edition, maybe you're just familiar with the older editions of it. It was just a single target attack, but now it actually has a duration, so you can use it round after round. I think that makes it a lot better and kind of makes it more competitive. Beware though that it's not really a pact weapon, so you're not going to be adding a bunch of life drinker damage to it or anything like that, and so that can be a bit of an issue. But I still think that it can be alright, especially if you're in need of some temporary hit points or whatever else to help you stay on the front line. Level 4, Dimension Door. The fact that Dimension Door doesn't really scale isn't such a big deal, because by now you're only looking at going from a 4th to a 5th level spell slot, so I think it's okay. It is a bunch of added mobility. It does kind of fulfill that same purpose that things like Expeditious Retreat or Misty Step did, but the fact that you can go greater distances, that you can take people with you, makes it a pretty good choice. However, I feel like the next two choices are even better. Well, Shadow of Moil, I already talked about that one a little bit, but if you're playing like a Pact of the Blade Warlock, that spell is excellent. I really like it. And even on a caster, it's not a bad choice. And then you have Sickening Radiance. Sickening Radiance is awesome. If you haven't read it, do so. Basically, you just get this like debilitating radiance, and things get like levels of exhaustion and stuff. But because whenever they leave or enter the area, they get like more stacks, you can use things like Repelling Blast and Grasp of Hadar to like move them in and out. At least I think you can. Maybe it has to be voluntary. I could be wrong about that. Actually, let's check it right now. I still have the book somewhere. Sickening Radiance. Quality entertainment right now. Let's see. If it moves into spell's area first time on its turn, it starts to turn there. Take a Constitution save or take 4d10 radiant damage, and suffers 1 level of exhaustion. Yeah, it doesn't say that. Just if it moves into spell's area first time on a turn, or starts its turn there. So, yeah, excellent. Just keep dealing damage and stacking up levels of exhaustion. So, 5th level spells. I should have mentioned on the 3rd that Create Undead's not a bad choice either. If you wanted to play that like summoner type, and maybe you took like Pact of the Chain, and you're just gonna have like a, I don't know, stable of summoned creatures, then I think Create Undead's really good. Dan's Macabre, quite excellent for 5th level spells. That's what reminded me of it. Hold Monster, again, kind of hit or miss, and you're not gonna be able to scale it up, but it is pretty decent, and the fact that you're way less limited to what kind of creatures you can hit than, say, Hold Person, which is only humanoids, makes it pretty decent. Contact of the Plane, if you went with Pact of the Tome, this is an excellent ritual to take. If you didn't go Pact of the Tome, it's still a great spell, but I don't know that I want to use one of my only spells knowing on Contact of the Plane. I mean, maybe you do. Maybe you like casting the spell a lot. It's an excellent spell. You know, it's worth mentioning it either way. And then more Xanatar's Guide to Everything goodness. Synaptic Static is an excellent spell. I just absolutely love that one. And Wall of Light. I mean, sure, it's not really a wall, but it's still a really good spell. I mean, would you rather have Wall of Force? Probably. But Wall of Light is still really good. So, I'm going to put that one on the list as well. And I think that's basically going to do it for my first and fifth level spells. Like I said, I will make another video today, hopefully. If not, it'll be tomorrow, and we'll cover the 69th level spells, and we'll go through like patron spells as well. Like I said, things like Witch Bolt, I would generally stay clear of. Even if you like Witch Bolt on wizards or whoever, just use Eldritch Blast for a Warlock. You don't have a lot of other spell options. You don't have a lot of spell slots. You know, if you can streamline things down and eliminate as many single target spells as you can, that's fine. Now, I'm not saying, you know, if you went Pact of the Fiend and you're like, hey, I could take Fireball, what about Fireball? Take Fireball, because that fills a different purpose than Eldritch Blast, right? Now you're doing a bunch of damage to a bunch of different targets. Eldritch Blast isn't really as good at that. Yeah, you can split your bullets up, but then you're just doing a little bit of damage to, you know, 2 or 3, 4 different things, as opposed to Fireball, where you can do a good chunk of damage to a bunch of stuff. So, anyways, those are my thoughts. We're going to end the video there. Feel free to like, subscribe, ring the bell, all that stuff. And most importantly, leave me your comments in the comment section. Maybe you agree with some of my choices. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you're like, hey, what about this spell? I think this spell's awesome. You didn't even mention it. By all means, I love reading everybody's comments. I think that's one of my favorite things about having a YouTube channel is just being able to interact with people and hearing like some of the crazy ideas for like characters and builds and stuff that they've done, or weird spell combinations that I hadn't even thought of, you know. Like I've always thought Cloud of Daggers was a pretty crappy spell until I saw somebody with Grasp of Hadar and Repelling Blast pushing guys in a narrow corridor back and forth through Cloud of Daggers, you know. So, like I said, that kind of stuff can be awesome. And you know, I've played the game a lot. I have a lot of like experience with and information, but that doesn't mean I know everything. And all the time I learn stuff from people in the comment section who like say, hey, you got this rule wrong, or hey, did you ever think of this, or try this with that. So like I said, please feel free to comment and like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff, and I'll see you next time.